Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Passionate Professional. And I must say, I have one passionate woman here who is really changing the world as we speak. Post-pandemic, post everything that's been going on in this world. I know a lot of us have big trauma and little trauma. And it seems in this day and age, every day, somebody's going through some aspect of trauma. So I wanted to unpack it today and break it down with who's becoming a friend of mine, which I'm so grateful to say, as well as a colleague, Dr. Edith Shiro. Let me tell you a little background on Edith. Edith had always been part of the human experience, which I just love. In traumatic events. She actually is as a person that people call when we had the thing in Sunny Isles, or we had the event at Parkland, or 9/11. Do I need to go on? I mean, this seems to be like daily events. And whenever they are, Edith is there to help people go through what they're going through. She is an amazing individual who helps, as I said, specializes in traumatic and post-traumatic growth. And I love that aspect of it. She holds space and guides people through the procedure, if you will, to achieve greater potential and higher consciousness. Dr. Edith Shiro is a co-founder of the Trauma and Resilience Center, a board member of the World Happiness Project Foundation, and an active member of Cadena International, providing humanitarian aid and disaster prevention worldwide. She's on the advisory board of the International Humanitarian Organization for HIAS, and she has worked at Bellevue, NYU Program for Survivors of Torture, Cambodian refugees, Montefiore Medical Center, Human Rights Clinical Support Network. Do I need to go on? She works with trauma-based therapy for mental health professionals and is a frequent guest on various TV shows, radio, podcast, and I am forever grateful that she is here with us now. Welcome, Edith.
Deborah, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I am thrilled to be sharing with you and my newfound friend, and how coincidences in life can, makes us connect in ways that are beautiful, and how things get evolved. And I can't even thank you enough for having this amazing space and connection with you, and super excited to be talking about all this stuff.
Thank you so much, Edith. I always start with, what were you doing in your room or outside when you were just lost in your joy and passion and happiness, when time just flowed before your mom called you for dinner? What was Dr. Edith Shiro doing in those early years?
That's cute. You know what I was doing? Playing guitar.
Really?
Yes. So I play guitar. I haven't practiced, but yes, I play guitar since I was very young, and play classical guitar. So I would sit down on my room, on my bed, and practice and practice, and try to read the score and sing and play. Those are good memories of, like, right before my mom would call me for dinner. That's what I would be doing.
That's wonderful. And as the years progressed, what made you get into this field? What was your journey like?
So, I understand now that I have this calling that is not just from my present moment and present experiences, but also from my DNA information that I've carried from my ancestors. I'm a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. I'm a grandchild of refugees from Syria. I am an immigrant myself. I grew up in a community of immigrants and refugees of war. And I've always had this question, like, how is it that people go through such difficult times, and they come out of it, and they can live their lives, and they can thrive, and they can transform themselves, they can appreciate life, and other people go through the same experience and they stay super depressed, they develop PTSD, they have a very hard time. And I kept asking, like, what makes a difference? How people do it? How some people do this, some other people. And also, I'm very, very curious. So I'm always being curious about the human condition and like what makes people act one way, another. So I've always been a psychologist, I feel, all my life. And if it wasn't, I mean, I studied a little bit, like, if it wasn't psychology, it was like the brain. It was like, how do we function? And my line of research has always been about some form of suffering and transforming that into growth. So I studied dissociation and chronic pain, and then traumatic memories, and how do we get into healing from those, and what kind of techniques do we use to heal. And it got me to post-traumatic growth, which is a beautiful concept. It brings so much hope and so much awareness into the really the experience of taking difficult moments and using them as an opportunity or as a springboard into transformation, into transcendence, into making this something amazing for your life. And I've seen it in my clinical practice. I've seen it in working with communities. I've seen this kind of experience, this kind of journey happen. And I'm super moved every time I see one of my clients go through that, one of my families go through that, one of my communities go through that. It's very moving, very moving.
That sounds amazing. It's interesting because I speak to a lot of my friends regarding this. We kind of feel like talk therapy these days is almost like passe because it keeps you in your story and you're just repeating your story over and over again. So I'm curious, Edith, what is your techniques? I know you have 5 steps. So can you break it? There's EMDR, there's so many new methodologies, if you will,
yeah,
modalities out there.
yeah.
What is it that you do that makes that breakthrough? I'm curious.
So I love that question, Deborah, because I'm not giving a recipe of what to do. What I'm telling you is I'm taking from science, I'm taking from energy medicine, I'm taking from psychodynamic psychology, and I'm taking from systemic thinking, which are all different approaches that inform my practice. And I'm describing really the stages for what I've seen people go through when they go from trauma to post-traumatic growth. And it's 5 stages. I didn't invent them. I kind of synthesize them. I put names to it. I put, like, in the same way that there are the 5 stages of grief. Yes. That Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had. We all know the 5 stages, but she didn't invent those stages. She just observed how these stages are going through, and she put a name to it. Same, like that concept. So you can use any method, any technique that you want. So for example, stage 1, radical acceptance. You have to pause and realize what's going on with you, accept completely and honestly what's happening, what kind of symptoms you have, what kind of addictions you have, what's your like dark night of the soul, like that rock bottom place that you're at, right? Without avoiding it, without pretending it's not there, without like bringing all kinds of excuses and all kinds of defenses. Second stage, you're going to seek help and protection. And you start talking about it, you start sharing with other people. Third stage, you go into a new narratives, into reinventing yourself. These stages, you can use EMDR, psychotherapy, psilocybin, psychotropics. You can use cognitive behavioral, you can go into the forest, you can go on a pilgrimage, you can join a guru. I mean, use the method of your choice. The important thing is that you do the journey. You know what I mean?
I do.
And the important thing is like whatever resonates with you, as long as you are really going deep into what's happening and really come face to face with your experience and allow it to get through to you so you can see it for what it is, validate it, and transform it, rewrite it, understand it from a different place, reinvent yourself. Like it's like regenerate something else that is happening inside of you.
I love that. Can you describe what the difference then for people who are listening to this? What is the difference between pain and suffering?
Yeah, so well, if we go from the Buddhist perspective, right? pain, they say pain is unavoidable and suffering is optional, meaning that
Mm.
adversity is always going to happen. We're always going to have obstacles in life. And like our very amazing person, Viktor Frankl, he was a psychiatrist, survivors of Holocaust and concentration camps. He wrote a very determinant book called The Man in Search for Meaning. I'm sure you've heard about that. And he also developed a whole theory in psychology called logotherapy, in which is all about finding meaning in life. And what he was saying is like, even in the worst of circumstances, people can take everything away from you except one thing: your ability to choose and your ability to have an attitude in front of what happens. Meaning, like, things are going to happen to you, but it's how you face them, what you do with it, and how you experience it that is going to make a difference, right? So that's the suffering part, is that how much you're going to suffer, how you want to suffer, for how long you're going to allow yourself to suffer, and what are you going to do with that suffering is what's going to make a difference in your life.
I love that. So, Edith, as you were growing up, were you aware of your DNA? Because we talk so much now about intergenerational, or
Yeah.
that it really comes from that. We all have to start to look at that.
Yeah.
You're not just born.
Right.
You got some DNA stuff from way back when. I mean, there's TV shows about it now. There's Netflix shows. It's incredible how everyone's starting to
Yes.
really talk about this. This is not like Happy Days and Leave It to Beaver anymore. Like,
Right.
we're really showing what family life is and generational things. So where along your journey did you go? Like you said, you wanted to do this, but where exactly? Was it in college? Was it in high school? Did something happen to you personally? Your story? Where did you start to go, this is what I want to do? And when you chose trauma, like, you could have chosen a lot of things in psychology.
Yeah, no, but I think trauma chose me, and it's not so much trauma, but it's the survival part of the trauma. It's like the transformational part of the trauma, because I'm not so much drawn into the suffering of the trauma, but it's how people have come out of it and do something else with it. And when I started to realize that I was having patterns and reactions and ways of thinking that I thought everybody had, and then I didn't realize that, no, it's me. And then I started looking at the literature on second and third generation Holocaust survivors, and I was like, wow, I check on everything on those lists. And when I started to see and get it more into like energy medicine and like more spiritual practices, which really started like 20 years ago, I realized like a lot of the Eastern cultures, the Buddhist, the culture, the Jewish culture, the Kabbalistic culture, that we come from our ancestors, and that all the wisdom that we bring from generations that are with us right now, there's not just genetic, but it's this collective unconscious. It's this all the stuff that we are part of all of it. We're not just in isolation. It made sense to me that this is, I am a composition of all the things that my ancestors have lived through, all the good stuff and all the bad stuff. And that became more and more, it resonated more and more with me. And then the more I talked about intergenerational trauma, the more I could incorporate it into my clinical practice as well. And a lot of the times it was an explanation of like, it's not just you and what's happening with you, because I'm very like relational when I, whenever I do something. So it's not just what happens with you, it's what you did in relation to your parents and to your grandparents and your community and your culture. And this is all connected, because it makes sense only when you see all of these pieces put together. Then you see that's why the person is doing what they're doing, or that's why the person is carrying the fears or the limitations or the beliefs that that they're carrying, right? It's not just your childhood, it's a lot more than that.
That's so interesting. So you were in college, and did you start to do this work early on? Like, did you have a trajectory? Did you know this is what I want to become? Or
can you believe? Yes. I mean, I don't know how I was very coherent in my line of curiosity. I was very consistent like that. When I was 18 and I was in school in Venezuela, I was studying psychology in Venezuela. my dissertation was on alexithymia, which is the incapacity to express feelings when people have a chronic illness. So I was studying and doing research with patients who had lower back pain and were not able to put feelings into words. Can you believe that? That was like my first way of connect. Now I understand, looking back, why I was curious about that. For me, it was like a random topic, but now I understand this is all connected to trauma. And I was like 18 when I chose this. Yeah, so I was like, oh. And then before that, I was working a lot with the Holocaust survivors in my community and interviewing my grandparents and other people in the community about their experience of war and of immigration. And so it's from very early on that I've been doing this. Yeah.
Wow. What do you think keeps people? And I know I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and I work with a lot of young people. It's all patterns. So why is it in our society that we have never learned, or a lot of people have not learned to learn about feelings? Is it a societal thing, and that it's so pivotal to understanding yourself? Or how do feelings come into that? Or how do people learn that? Because
I
that's
think,
so important within jobs or in relationships, and
yeah,
people don't know who they are or how to express themselves. They think it's
right.
just a job out there. Like, oh, I'll just go to Indeed. It's like, no, you got to understand your value and how to
Yeah.
express it. But go ahead.
Yeah, but remember that we are living in times with so much freedom and so much peace compared to coming from a Second World War or First World War. So I know we're in difficult times and we're post-pandemic or still in the pandemic, but one thing is, like, 50 years ago, we were still coming out of surviving a war,
Mm.
and people were in survival mode. So it was very practical. How do I survive? How do I bring food to my table? How do I keep shelter? How do I have a roof under my head? You know what I'm saying? So feelings and things like that were not so important. Also, from a philosophical point of view, there was a very clear distinction between the body, right, and everything else. It's like a line that is cut
Mm.
in between, our body and our brain, our minds, in which, like, okay, if you're sick because you broke a bone and because your stomach hurts or because your head hurts, okay, we can attend to that, and there are words for that. But everything else, it's too abstract. Like, there's no, like, a concrete thing to talk about. How are you going to talk about a heartbreak? How are you going to talk about a depression? How are you going to, like, it's not tangible. And it's not even something that, I can tell you this, there were soldiers that used to come back from war back in, the Second World War, and after, and Vietnam, they would come to the US and they would be called, they're shell shocked. But
Mhm.
it's
Oh,
like,
that's right.
oh, it's just right. It's just because they heard bombs or because their friends died. So let them send them back to the war so they can continue to be with friends and they get over it. There wasn't even like a space to be able to talk about feelings, about post-traumatic stress disorder, but like that came much later, because that's when we began to open up for like a whole language with feelings, with like connection, with like opening the space to survive. And but that's a luxury in some ways. I feel like it only happens when we're not in survival mode. It's when we have peace around us that we're able to sit down in a safe space, right? That's what I mean. That's why I think it's so important to create safe spaces and secure spaces, so we can open up, so we can be vulnerable, so we can say, this is how I feel, and this is what I think, and this is what's happening in my body, and this is how I'm connecting everything with myself and my past. But because it's, those spaces need to happen. Otherwise, it feels very threatening to be able to do that.
Wow. And how does that translate into maybe young people today? What are you seeing as the foremost thing with, let's say, young adults in their 20s? Is adulting taking a little bit more time these days? Where do you see this and how
Yeah,
transforming
I,
that?
I was actually just talking about that in other platforms as well, because one of the things that I'm seeing is that, I don't know if that's been your experience, Deborah, but this generation of teenagers and young adults have really been affected by the pandemic.
Yes.
The last 3 years have gotten them into a place of limbo, of suspended uh, place of like not being able to continue their journey because somehow their sense of purpose has been shaken or has been erased or has not been defined properly. So I see a lot of them a little bit like struggling with relationships, with communication, with being in touch with themselves and with others. I also think that the amount of information that we're being bombarded with, and like the young generation, the younger generations, because of social media, because of technology. I mean, it's wonderful. Technology is amazing. And yeah, but on the other hand, it's really isolating and fragmenting the relationships between young adults and not being able to develop those spaces of empathy and compassion and like brotherhood or sisterhood in which you're just coexisting in a space in presence of another being, when you can hug or you can kiss or you can check with each other, are you doing okay, how are you? That's not happening so much because we're on Zoom, and because everybody's working on their own, and because everybody's rushing everywhere, and because there's so much overstimulation about everything that's happening, that those spaces of like more quiet or more silence or more pausing and reconnecting with yourself are not happening so much. Although I'm concerned that the levels of anxiety and depression are getting so high that we're seeing this in the next generation. I mean, we too, we're all being affected by that, but I see that even more with the younger generations.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. Absolutely correct. And so after you decided to do this dissertation, where did you go on from there? And what were like some stories that this changed your life? You know, you're on this road, right? You know exactly where you want to go from and all your, I just feel like all your generations behind you are marching with you.
I know.
It's like, we're following
Like
you because you're going to take us to the promised land.
I know, it feels like that. And that's why, for example, when I moved to New York, I was living in the Bronx, and I worked with the Cambodian refugees. There's a whole community of Cambodians in New York, in the Bronx, and another one in LA that came from 1979, they were mostly killed. It was a big genocide in Cambodia, much like the Holocaust. And they were like, a lot of them became refugees in New York and LA. And I really started working with that community and say, wow, this is not a Jewish community, this is a Cambodian community. And how are they living this experience? And how are they surviving this experience? And so I started to really learn about some of the leaders in this community and how they were able to thrive and how they transformed their lives. So again, I saw this post-traumatic growth. That was actually my PhD dissertation. And that's why my book, actually, the book that I wrote that came out last month, came out of a little bit of that experience as well. And then it continued, let's say 9/11, I was working, I was in New York, I was running away from the big thing when 9/11 happened. And then the Red Cross, as you know, called me, and I worked with some of the survivors. And then I worked with some of the refugees in New York and the immigrants that would come to the city. And that's how it continued. So it's been really a big learning process.
That's amazing. Speaking of your book, which I wanted to get into, tell everybody what the name of your book is and what it is, and I can show it. Are you going to show it? Yep.
You can show it too. The letters are in white. It's called The Unexpected Gift of Trauma, The Path to Post-Traumatic Growth. It's my baby. It came out last month. I'm very proud of it. It really has taken a life of its own. And it talks a lot about these 5 stages. It talks about like intergenerational trauma. It talks a lot about collective trauma, not just the individual. And I mean, people have been loving it, and it's been transformational also for me to put it out there in the world. It's been
I think it's such a timely book. You know what I mean? I think this is the time that people need to change. I read somewhere, I think it was Forbes, that was saying Most kids now are writing essays, like for college entrance, about trauma. That's what the whole essays are about these days, is all their trauma. And I think for anyone listening to this,
Wow.
it behooves you to buy the book, because it may have been very special if you wrote about trauma. So, God forbid your mother died or your dad died and you had your family. Now it's everybody has some form of trauma. And if you want to rewrite your story or show your resilience and an understanding of how to put it somewhere that you're going to bring that value to that college or to that job, I implore you to read this book,
No.
because this is very, very important.
Yes.
You are amazing, Edith. Edith, last thing, what would you say to people who deserve a chance at a career, want to study psychology or want to do something good? This generation, the Gen Zs, are all about purpose and passion and putting something that's happened, to be honest with you, so many traumatic, it's so interesting. So many kids are like, this is what happened to me, or this is what, and I want to help others. Very similar. What could you suggest to them where they deserve their chance?
You know what?
You.
I know, I mean, to become themselves. That's exactly what I was going to say. This Generation Z, as you know, Deborah, because you're doing amazing work with these kids, and I keep referring you people just so everybody knows. Because you're so needed in the work that you do. But you know what? I think if this generation can stop using so much comparison, because social media and all these platforms, all they do is compare and compare and compare yourself with others, and who did this and who did that, and look how they achieved this and they achieved that, and the influencers. And if you can turn the lens into you, instead of comparing it to other people all the time, you're going to find in yourself that light and that purpose and that motivation that has nothing to do with anybody else. It has to do with you and your story and your feelings and your understanding and your purpose in life. And all you have to do is pay attention to that, Deborah. And I know you're doing that for the kids. And for me, I think the more we can send this message to these kids and say, just pay attention to yourself, stop comparing, like get out of the comparison thing. And I think it affects adults too. I mean, we're like we women, we're like, oh yeah, I'm so fat, I'm not, my wrinkles, my this, and look at the other one, and this plastic surgery and the other thing. It's very hard nowadays. It's very hard. And they travel this way and they have this house and the other hand. It's very hard to be able to stay focused on who you are and compare with yourself and be in tune with yourself, because in there is where you really find that purpose. So that would be my message for this generation.
Oh my God, I love it. I could just sit here and talk to you forever. I want everyone, and I really mean this, to go out right now and buy The Unexpected Gift of Trauma, The Path to Post-Traumatic Growth, because you all deserve, who are on here, to grow, to become your best selves. Dr. D, let me ask you a question. How can people reach you? How can they buy your book? How can they reach you if they want to work with you? What are your social media handles?
So
Please
yes,
share.
please. And if you want, you can put it in the Zoom too, on Amazon, on Barnes and Nobles, on Walmart, on Indie, or any of the places that sells books. My books is going to be there. Is there already? I please want you to get it, to read it, to tell me what you think of it. Also, you can find it in Audible, you can find it in Kindle, you can find it hardcover. I mean, you choose how you want to have it. As long as you buy it, leave a review on Amazon, that would be great. You can find me on Instagram. It's Dr. Edith Shiro, dr.edithshiro. You can find me on my website, www.dredithshiro.com. I think I just have a YouTube channel now that it just opened, that it's Dr. Edith Shiro. Facebook is Dr. Edith Shiro. So you put my name there, you'll find me. Or you can call Deborah. She knows where to find me.
Exactly.
Send her a message. And I would love to hear from you, especially after you buy the book and you tell me what you think.
Absolutely. Again, Dr. Shiro, thank you, Edith, for so much for coming on today. This has been
Thank you.
such a special program, and I know that we have helped so many people out there to know that you're not alone and that there is help. And the woman right here on this Zoom is the person to do it. So
Thank you, Deborah.
so much.
Thank you. Only in collaboration. See, working with, we all do this in collaboration with each other. So thank you for this wonderful invitation and looking forward for more.
Me too. Bye.
Bye, bye, bye.